Disclaimer: this podcast is not in any way affiliated with Universal, DreamWorks, or Big Idea Entertainment. All opinions discussed belong to the person sharing their views and may not reflect on our personal beliefs. We also ask to respect the privacy of both the interviewees and the interviewers. Thank you and enjoy the show.
What can you tell us about this fine woman right here?
Oh, one of the finest women on the planet.
Wait, did you say one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a couple other fine women,
I
like
really hope Jennifer does not hear this interview.
my
I
own
really hope
mother,
so.
of course, and her mother.
Welcome back to the What's the Big Idea podcast, the podcast that talks to former associates of Big Idea Productions about their lives before, during, and after VeggieTales. Joe McFadden's legacy continues with VeggieTales, Little One Penguins, and more right now.
Now, before I head over to the next episode, I want you to kind of backtrack a bit. The way that I see Big Idea, especially with talking to so many people, for someone like you who's been there since, 96, 3 years after the initial inception of the company, there's a period between 96 up until 98, and then there's 98 up until about, I would say, maybe 2000, and then 2001 to about 2003. Three very, at least in my mind, distinct eras of Big Idea as a company. What would you say was the differences between being at Big Idea from 96 to 98 to 98 to 2000?
The biggest difference from 98 to 2000, that's when merchandising started to happen, and we rented out a second floor in the building. I think we were on the third floor, and this was on the fifth floor, or it was the other way around. But there was an art department. There was a bunch of artists just doing 2D artwork for merchandising. They had nothing to do with the actual video production, so it was like this whole other company almost doing stuff that was VeggieTales related. Because up until then, every single person was involved somehow in the production of the video. And then suddenly, there's all these people that didn't really have anything to do with the videos being made. They were making advertising and books and pencil cases and calendars and plates with VeggieTales characters on them. And yeah, I think that was the biggest difference, is that there was this huge growth spurt and it grew a whole new limb essentially of the company. And it was kind of weird to know that we were getting bigger. Somewhere around 98 is when the animators were a little concerned about how little we were getting paid. They were hiring all these other people, but we still weren't getting paid all that much. I remember looking into joining a union or something like that, because I was starting to be concerned about not getting heard and not getting paid as well as we should be. Nothing ever came of that, obviously, because there's still no animators union as far as I know. Yeah, we ended up getting pay raises. They were really good about that in general during that first section. Felt like there was all this growth, but not feeding the people that got them to that point. There was never any bad feelings or anything like that.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, we're growing to a certain point. What about you feed the people who are literally making the product that is the reason why this company exists in the first place? So that's very understandable. What was your wage like, honestly? How much were you getting paid yearly?
Boy, I really don't remember. I would say, I think it was in the low 20s. We were on a salary. I want to say it was like in the low 20s, if even 20. I don't even remember. But to me, it was like a whole lot of money back then, especially it was on a salary. But we ended up working a lot for that salary, because there were times that easily working 10 or 12 hours a day. We did it if we could, and if we couldn't, it was understood that, I've got something else I need to do. I can't stay here. And not everybody was like that. There were some people that would work from 9 to 5, and that would be it. The love of what we were doing just drove us to want to work as much as possible on it. And we all became kind of tight friends too. So any socialization we had was generally work people. You kind of lived and breathed the work for a little while. Yeah, I don't remember the exact pay, but it wasn't really that bad.
I've always wondered that, and I never really asked anybody that before, so.
Yeah, I have no idea what other people were getting paid or anything like that, but I enjoyed it. I was willing to work for that amount. So,
Has to mean something.
right. Yeah. Kept me alive, kept me buying groceries and toys occasionally. And
Joe McFadden was still living the good life, and hopefully still is.
yeah, not as much anymore.
Phil Vischer might want to start paying some residuals to his animators.
Oh man, I look back on that sometimes. I mean, I don't think Phil got anything out of it himself, but wow, that'd be weird to be getting residuals or something. I wish I would have signed a better contract. But We were young kids. We didn't really know. It was a kind of a new industry too. It didn't really exist. There was some stuff, but not at that level. Well, besides like Pixar.
Yeah, and speaking of levels, King George and the Ducky was quite the considerable level up from previous episodes because working with Maya instead of Softimage, big transition. First episode released in the new millennium. Also, very much the company is steadily expanding. I think at this point was like at 200 people, if I remember the history correctly. So, what was it like working on King George and the Ducky? A more simple episode, but also in a lot of ways, I think, more difficult, possibly.
Yeah, well, there was so much that happened right then. We ended up moving to Lombard, and that's when they bought space downtown. It was actually an old theater. They were going to rehab the theater because we were going to have a stage inside, and they were going to build stuff like a studio on top of that. So yeah, Big Idea purchased it, and I remember going to the groundbreaking. So temporarily, we moved into the Yorktown Mall. It was an old Walgreens or Woolworth. It was a two-story section of the mall, and they somehow got it for a good price. So we moved in there temporarily while they were doing construction on the final resting place of Big Idea, the downtown theater. That all went so bad. It's a shame. That's why I even bought my house here in Lombard, because I was going to be within biking distance. I mean, I can't even walk there from here. But that's why I bought the house where I did, because it was going to strategically be located near the offices. So that transition was happening. And then, yeah, we transitioned from Softimage to Maya. So that was a whole new thing, too, and changing software is always scary. You get used to the way things work, and then there's all these new things that you have to do. Essentially, the work's the same, but to accomplish it, it's a whole different thing. It's like the difference between driving an airplane and a boat. This is all different. It's still transportation. Anyway, so the King George and the Ducky was a big deal because of all the changes. We had moved from downtown to come out to Lombard and working in a mall, which was super cool because we had our food court. So every single day you could have something different. I don't remember any specifics about King George and the Ducky. Yeah, that's one of those episodes. I don't think I've seen that a really long time. But yeah, I don't have any specific recollections about the animation on the episode.
One of the things, and I'm thinking this is probably more of a modeler question rather than an animator question, but this episode, since it was the first one with Maya, had a lot of, even in the final episode, there were a couple of interesting kinks with this episode. The countertop was yellow when it wasn't supposed to be that way. I don't know if you remember something like that. But for me, the biggest thing is the character's eyeballs in this episode, because on the cover art, the typical VeggieTales style was with ovals, but in that episode, they were more circular. And also because new software, the eyes look a lot more glossy and more glassy than they usually would have looked like. And it was stuff that was ironed out within the episode after this one, Esther, but King George being the first one, I don't know if you remember anything like that. It's just that I've seen this episode so many times, I just start to notice things. So
yeah, I don't remember any specifics like that. I remember being in new software is always going to be a different. It's hard to match the exact look of the previous stuff. The controls work differently. The way it's engineered is different. The way it renders, the textures, and the materials are going to be different. This sounds so familiar where the eye lattices actually got turned off somehow, because I think the character would move a lot slower when you had the eye lattices on. The first versions of Maya, we would turn off the eyes to speed up the body animation because it was so heavy on the processor. We'd turn them off occasionally. You could like turn it to 0 and it would have no influence and would move a lot faster. So I think a couple times they actually got rendered with the eyes turned off. Were they 100% round in some of the shots?
I mean, they were pretty round all throughout the entire episode.
That might have been part of it too, is that, yeah, something about the settings or some, yeah, I don't remember exactly, and maybe we just re-rendered stuff where the eyes were turned off.
Yeah, especially with early computer technology that y'all were working with. Anything could happen to ruin a frame of an episode because technology, especially back then, for some reason just doesn't like to cooperate. I mean, still to this day.
Yeah, things are a lot more stable than they used to be, but we never had that many problems. A lot of it was about performance issues. Like in Softimage, we couldn't see the mouths in the scene we were animating. All the mouths were done as a separate file. So you just go through and animate a mouth, and then that would get applied at render time. So we never saw the mouth while we were animating in Softimage. And for Maya, I can't remember who came up with it, but there was like a curve that would just hang out in front of the mouth that you could at least see what the mouth was going to look like when it was being animated. And eventually that became more refined. Alan Millman, he wrote some code that actually made a shader using that curve. So yeah, as time went on, it was easier and easier to see. But yeah, there were always technical things that would go wrong, or the controls on the character would get whacked out or something like that. They would stretch out of the screen, do some weird stuff, and you'd have to go in and try to figure out why. The worst ones were when it looked okay in the scene, but then it would render differently than it looked in the scene. Like, what is going on? There was a lot of technical issues like that that would happen, especially in the early days of Maya.
And speaking of technical issues, I'm pretty sure I'm going to give you PTSD by reminding you of this episode right here. Esther, the girl who became queen, or as I like to call her, Esther, the girl who became the nightmare fuel to every single animator working at Big Idea Productions.
Boy, I don't remember exactly why that was tough. Yeah, I don't remember. Could you clue me in?
The strand of hair right here.
Oh,
The bane of every single person working on this episode's existence. This one strand of hair.
yeah, I do remember. Yeah, it was always in the way and it was always doing something that you didn't want it to do. Oh, yeah, that's vaguely familiar, but I can't say. Maybe I didn't animate a whole lot of the Esther shots. But yeah, that was the first time we had dimensional lips. No, Madame Blueberry had dimensional lips.
Yeah, and I think in the commentary, Phil Vischer said that Esther's lips were maybe a slightly modified Madame Blueberry's lips.
Probably, this she was in soft homage, this was Maya, so essentially it's the same thing. But yeah, now that you mentioned the strand of hair, I do remember that being an issue and working back through a bunch of shots, not my own shots, but other people's shots, and going through and fixing that hair, having to go through and hand animate it to keep from going inside of her head and to keep it from doing weird stuff. And oftentimes, things like that would happen. You'd have to go in and fix a shot just by animating every single frame of what it was doing. It wouldn't behave if you let it interpolate. So it was literally every single frame. You had to pose it and set a keyframe. Luckily, they were 10-minute shots or something like that. But yeah, little PTSD.
And the other thing that I remember in early renders of Esther, Phil Vischer had an issue with her eyes because her eyes before the final episode came out had no whites to them, to which she looked very odd. So I think the animators had to go back and add some whites into her eyes to not make her look so otherworldly.
Wow. Yeah, I don't remember that, but if Phil said it, it probably was a thing. Yeah, I don't remember that specifically. I don't see any white on that image.
Not on the cover, but in the episode, there's definitely times where I remember seeing white. But yeah, you see Phil, he's Heyman right over there. He's watching over everyone.
Yeah.
He reigns supreme. His word is the law.
Yeah, I think Lunt is one of my favorite voices that he does. I mean, the whole character really, is just, he could do and say things that none of the other characters could. That was always one of my favorite ones to animate too. I love the cheeseburger song.
Did you animate the Heyman song for this episode? Because that one had him and Mr. Desert doing a lot of fun dancing.
That doesn't sound familiar, but it's possible. Yeah, I don't remember for sure.
All right, that's good enough. But yeah, Esther, nightmare for everyone involved. The person you could blame is Joe Sapulich because he was the guy who came up with this design.
Yeah, Joe's the scapegoat for a lot of things. He brings it on himself. He's a great guy, just all around. A lot of fun to talk to. Yeah, it would be a unique one. You interviewed Buddy, right?
Yeah, we have his episode up. Him being render wrangler, this was his first episode, so he would have to fix up all the frames because with Esther's hair, oh no, the shadows, and we have to re-render it again, and I have to recolor it in and stuff like that. So
Yep. Oh man, yeah, those guys work really hard. Joe Sapulich is like a Debbie Downer version of Buddy, if you know who Debbie Downer is.
a lot of people hold this episode in high regard, so I think the stress and the nightmarish production paid off for you guys because a lot of people enjoyed this episode.
Oh man, yeah, it was always worth it when you saw the final thing. And there was always a cringe moment when a shot that you just had to let go. Well, it's got to be done. It's not as good as it could be. But yeah, generally when we saw the final product, it was very proud moments.
It's not like a fan would be like, oh, what the heck? Why didn't you, Joe McFadden, fix frame number 5673? Nobody except yourself would have to deal with that internal conflict. So,
Oh yeah, that's the animator's curse is, you watch it so slowly and frame by frame that every frame matters to you. But then when you realize, and I came to that realization pretty early on, but some people would obsess over the smallest things. I'm like, it's 5 frames, like, of course you want it to be right, but at the same time, nobody is going to see it or really know. People just watch it like a movie. They don't sit there and analyze it. I'm sure some people analyze it at some point, but in general, yeah, it was going to go on and to obsess over something small was always folly.
Now, fortunately for y'all, when it came to Lyle the Kindly Viking, one of the things that at first might have seemed like folly was water, but I think it turned out pretty well, considering the time and the maybe $1 million budget that y'all were having at this point in time. So, what can you tell us about Lyle the Kindly Viking?
Yeah, I remember wondering how we were going to pull off the water. And that was one of the questions with Jonah too, because Lyle was done a little more stylistically, whereas Jonah, they wanted it to really feel like water. We had an engineering department and all kinds of stuff. So I was only concerned about animation, and then I was actually doing a lot of coding to create animation tools. We improved Maya a whole lot for our specific work style and stuff like that. So I was always writing these tools because, I had a background in programming. Coding, as a lot of people say. I always called it programming when I was a kid. Anyway, so yeah, I was writing a lot of code in between shots. And while I was supposed to be animating, I was rewriting the graph editor or something like that to make it better and more usable for us. Yeah, boy, I'm trying to think of anything specific in Lyle. Lyle is one of my favorite episodes. I think I just like the subject matter, but I can't think of any specific stuff I animated in Lyle. Yeah, once again, I should have watched all the episodes ahead of doing this.
No, that's fine. But you do bring up an interesting point, saying that you, being a coder, helped develop some tools. So my question is, did you have any hand in developing this piece of software known as VeggieTales in a box?
Not really. That stuff all right there, that's a lot of my work, making those interfaces and stuff like that. So this is like a compilation of a lot of people's work. I mean, Alan Millman brought all this stuff together and made the VeggieTales in a box, where it automatically installs. So they came up with all these things for the penguins because, those were limbed characters and there was a lot more going on. So they wanted a more visual way to pick the characters. Now, I had created a system on the VeggieTales characters. We called it the right mouse click, but you would just use your right mouse button and click on the character, and a customized list of actions for the character would come up. We could call up the mouth animation like this. So this is still where we did a lot of our mouth animation. It wasn't, you didn't do it watching the scene. You just kind of did the animation. So the worst is when you would spend a lot of time doing some animation, and when you got to your actual shot, you realize that the character's back was turned or something. That's one of the disadvantages of not doing the mouse directly in the camera. But yeah, a lot of that stuff that I coded, those were individual toolboxes that would come up. So yeah, I created a bunch of that stuff. Then it all got installed in the Veggies in a box. But that was for different production houses to be able to install the stuff and get going real quickly.
It makes me really sad that this software does not exist anymore because I really wish that there was somehow a way to like save it just to preserve it, just to see what it was like to have people like you and other studios that were working with the VeggieTales IPs, what it was like to have something like that. Because it seems like it was a really nifty tool that could do a lot of things, but unfortunately, because it's outdated beyond belief.
Well, yeah, it is and it isn't. We were kind of making this stuff up as we went, and I have the feeling that a lot of animation production places, they saw what we were doing and kind of expanded upon it. Not that we did anything super unique and stuff like that, but at the same time, the idea of picking characters, body parts, and stuff like that, instead of picking them directly on the screen, which you would always get a piece of geometry or some control you didn't expect to get. It was easier to choose things out of a menu, a lot faster for people that are visually oriented, like a lot of artists are. It was just easier to do it that way than to pick some weird little point or something on the screen and then know that wasn't the eyes or something like that. All those interfaces were just basic coding inside of Maya. I still actually use some of those tools today. They're modified and stuff like that, but a lot of that stuff, I kind of took all the code with me when I left, took everything that I possibly could, because I knew I'd probably want to use some of it. Some of those interfaces I still use to this day. They're just modified for more generic uses. Most people are working with the VeggieTales stuff in Blender, and all these tools were for Maya. You'd have to use Maya in order to be able to see how it works and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know if it's even really all that possible without a lot of work. But yeah, I still have a bunch of the characters on disk CD-ROMs. I've often wanted to bring them up and do stuff with them. And I think I did many years ago. I brought up a scene and rendered some stuff from Nineveh. No, not Nineveh, the tent city that they set up in Josh and the Big Wall, I think it was. I started playing with that. I never did that much with it, but yeah, I want to grab some old characters sometime and try some new stuff with them. I've got to learn Blender. So many people learn Blender. I can't remember which guy it was, but he sent me a bunch of the characters that are available in Blender. I was like, oh man, this should really motivate me to do it. Still haven't taken the time to learn Blender.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one day, but who knows? Now, the thing that I find kind of a little bit offensive is that apparently you worked on the sing-alongs for Jonah, but apparently you did not animate anything on Jonah.
Yeah, I did not get to work specifically on Jonah, and I don't know why. I was trying to recall what had happened during the viewing of Jonah. And I still don't remember exactly why I was pulled off. I know I was angry about it because, here we are going to do a feature film. What better thing for an animator to do than a feature film? And, hey, you're going to go work on this TV show called 321 Penguins. Like, Penguins was cool, but it wasn't my thing. Yeah, I was just kind of miffed that I had to go do that instead. I don't recall why, but I think they needed help or some technical help or something that only I could provide. So kind of did it to myself by being such a technical animator. I think I animated a few shots in there more towards the end when they needed help because they hired a lot of extra people in for Jonah. No animators though. All the animation was handled in-house, but we needed help with lighting and rendering and stuff.
Yeah, I'll never forget the story of the render farm that became the render void and just how unimaginably stressful it must have been for every single person involved to just see all of the movie in this void and we don't even know if we'll be able to recover it, but fortunately they were able to recover all their work and press on. But yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. There was some really bad stuff that happened during Jonah. I mean, it was such a large undertaking. I don't know if anybody was really prepared, but yeah, there were multiple times it didn't look like the movie was going to get finished. The render farm freaking out was one of them for sure.
It was like what Keith Lango said. It's like, oh, you think making a movie is just you three times a typical episode, and then you realize it's not that at all. It's way more complicated and more nuanced than that.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It was just the size we were trying to render at and just the enormity of the production. Yeah, it was a lot.
I was gonna ask if you remember animating anything off this other sing-along compilation.
Oh boy. What was the main thread that was holding it all together?
The main story was that Bob and Larry are trying to get him out of his dressing room, but Archibald doesn't budge because he doesn't want to get swallowed by a whale.
Oh, I definitely didn't animate. I think I was working full on penguins at this point. The penguin stuff didn't really let up. I think I never really went back to VeggieTales. I just don't remember exactly, but things started falling apart after Jonah too, of course. I really don't think I animated on this at all. I think we were finishing up a penguins episode.
The thing that makes it difficult is that 2002 was when everybody was working on 100 million different things. There were people working on Jonah, people working on Star of Christmas, Easter Carol.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, yeah. I was working on the Easter Carol a little bit. I remember jumping around to a bunch of different things because I remember animating the Easter eggs falling out of the sky, coming up with a way to make that happen. So many Easter eggs. Me and Mike Glaubach, I remember working with him, come up with the easiest solution. But I don't remember working on that full time either, though. So I must have been jumping around. A lot of this stuff is just kind of just kind of gone.
How was it that, if you could recall, were you guys able to animate all of the Easter eggs without destroying the freaking render farms?
Don't remember exactly the rendering part of it, but to animate them all, we came up with a little rig. We had 5 or maybe 7 different egg animations. So I wrote a piece of code that would duplicate each one of those on a random basis and then position it randomly somewhere within the scene to make all these animated eggs coming out of the sky. We didn't have particles or anything back then. Normally you'd use particles or something like that with a geometry replacement. But yeah, each one was essentially hand animated, but then they were duplicated over and over. So each of the landings kind of looked unique because we would rotate each one and stuff. So even though there was only 7 of them, it looked very widespread and very random. We made the geometry small enough that the render farm could handle it. We might have used a special thing called instancing, where there's like a model, and it's hard to explain exactly how it works, but essentially the software doesn't have to think about each individual object. It views it as one object and it kind of renders it real quickly, even though there's hundreds of them. That's a really bad explanation of instancing, but it made the render a lot faster.
Since you said that you were working on penguins, did you have anything to do with Hope at all, since she has limbs and things like that?
No, definitely not. I didn't like working with limbed characters. That's another reason I was kind of sad about having to go work on the penguins. It was so foreign to me. Most of my animation career was Veggies. It was very rare that I animated something with limbs, so it was always kind of scary to me. I didn't know how. Even to this day, I really don't like it. I'd rather animate a logo or things happening, but I've definitely opened up. There was something real fun, real special, real easy. Not easy, but yeah, it was just different animating the veggies.
How different was the animation process from your typical production cycle of VeggieTales episode to this one, which I think this would be like the very last thing that you worked on before you got laid off?
This one was weird because me and Chris Foreman, he was another animator. We actually got to write and direct one of the segments. This is the one with the modern Major General, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I wrote and directed and pretty much animated that whole thing. Like I was responsible for almost the entire production of that segment. But that was one of my biggest thrills was to get something in that I had conceived on my own, like, hey, I wrote this and came up with the storyboards and did the whole thing.
Now, very similar to the Easter Carol, animating all of those books falling down at the very end. Crazy feat. I would
Yeah,
love to know how you were able. I guess, was it similar to what you did with the eggs?
it was exactly the same thing I did with the eggs. It was just such a good technique, it would work for a lot of things. The books were a little bit different. They had different shape. They might bounce and land differently, but the idea was the same, is that you just hand animated a bunch of them and then positioned and rotated them so it looked like there were hundreds.
The other thing that sticks out about this episode, and particularly relating to you, you were on the audio commentary for this episode, to which somebody years ago pointed out that you sounded kind of distressed when you were flat out told the audience, please go out and buy the Jonah DVD.
I don't remember that, but I'll have to go back and watch that commentary on that. That'd be a blast. I remember doing the commentary and I remember being a little scared because I didn't know what I was going to say, I have a tendency to just yammer on and go off on tangents and whatnot. But that was a lot of fun doing a commentary for something. Boy, yeah, I really miss working there. Gonna make me cry.
Well, save your tears, because now that we've reached the end of your first stint at Big Idea, now we got to talk about the downfall, you being laid off, and all those emotions and stuff like that.
Oh man, a lot of it's a blur. There was so much happening, and one of the things that somebody else might have talked about, but we were going to have this big party on a boat at Lake Michigan at the end of Jonah. They decided to cancel it at the last minute because everybody was going to be laid off, and they didn't think we wanted a big party. Like, oh, come on, that would have been one last big hurrah. I think they were afraid that somebody was going to like throw Phil off the boat or something like that. It's going to come to bodily harm. We were just dating at the time, but Jennifer, the other producer, Amik, was trying to get after Jonah work immediately on the next episode of VeggieTales, and Jennifer wanted to take some time off because she worked really hard on Jonah and was exhausted. And Amik kept pushing her to take the assignment for the next show, and Jennifer was like, no, I really want some time off. It's because Amik knew that if Jennifer didn't take that producer job, that she was going to get laid off. And yeah, sure enough, that's what happened. She looks back occasionally and is like, man, my life would have been different, if I had just decided to keep working on and didn't take a little time off. But that's the way it goes. When I found out Jennifer was laid off, I was so mad. I remember punching the toilet paper roll holder in the bathroom. And I'm not a violent person. I hurt my hand. I was just so angry. I punched it. Losing like a lot of people that rapidly, it was really weird. And I remember going to a few parties at people's houses and people just commiserating about all the good times and what was going to happen next. It was a rough transition. And I continued working there because of whatever reasons, I can't remember. I just happened to have enough skills and be in the right places at the right times to continue working there for quite some time. Not a really long time, but I remember my last day though. I was in the office and it was literally nothing to do. I'm just hanging out, looking at stuff on the internet. I'm like, man, I think I'm just going to go home. So I hopped on my bike and I rode home because I used to ride my bike to work in any kind of weather, any situation. I would ride my bike. It was rare that I actually drove in. It was only like 3 miles, so it wasn't a big deal. Some people would 5 or 6 miles or 10 miles even. But anyway, so I decided to just go home since there was nothing going on. After like half an hour of being at home, I get a call, and it was the producer at the time. And he called me back in. He's like, you weren't supposed to leave. And I'm like, well, there's literally nothing to do. And he's like, well, it doesn't mean you can leave. I'm like, well, find me something to do. And so I went back in. He called me into his office and pretty much fired me. So I'm like, oh, man. I think I was on the chopping block anyway, at that point, kind of one of the last people left. I think I was the last of the original people because Keith Lango was still there, Brian Roberts was still there, stuff like that. But they had come on a little bit later. So yeah, I think I was like the last surviving original hire, that wasn't Phil or Mike.
Yeah, I mean, in your spot, I think I would do the same thing. If I was at my job and they had nothing for me to do, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go home. And then for them to say, you can't do that. So then you're like, okay, give me something to do. And then they say, okay, come back to the office. And then for them to say, now you're fired. That is such a dick thing to do. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, it felt to me like a
Spite.
right, or they were just looking for an excuse. It might have been spite. I really don't know. But like I said, I don't think they would have let me go if it wasn't around the corner anyway. At a salary position, we often had that ability to kind of come and go when we were needed. It wasn't like a lot of jobs where you got to be there waiting for something to happen. I might have said that I was going home or something like that, or told somebody, but I didn't tell the right people, apparently. I don't remember exactly. I just remember being called back in. And yeah, that was the last of it. It felt weird to finally be let go, but I knew it was coming. You could see the writing on the wall.
So the thing that I ask pretty much every person on this podcast, what do you think was the biggest cause for Big Idea's downfall?
I would say it's just too rapid of growth, wanting to do too much too quickly. It's understandable. And I've never been in that situation where you have lots of money and lots of fame. Well, not fame so much, but the ability to do things you've always wanted to do. The attention's there, the financing's there. And I think that Phil had a lot of ambitions that he wanted to do. And I think he just tried to do too many of them at once. And he surrounded himself with a bunch of people that said they could make these things happen. And nobody said, you need to back off on this. And I don't know for sure, those are meetings that I wasn't privy to or anything, but it just got the feeling that a lot of people trying to please Phil when somebody probably should have said, no, that's too rapid of growth. It's not going to work. I think a lot of the people wanted it to work out. Usually when that's your job, of course it's going to work out, but seeing the big picture, yeah, we just try to do too much too soon is I think what it comes down to.
What you said is pretty much spot on from what Phil Vischer said in his book. I don't know if you ever read Me, Myself, and Bob, but during that time, since he wasn't able to have his hands in every single facet of the company, rightfully so, because of how fast it was expanding, he hired people to do those jobs for him. And these people would eventually have meetings without Phil. So they were basically running the company without Phil's consent or anything like that. And by the time that he realized the damage of what that caused, it was like, oh, it's already too late. Like Big Eddie's already in the red. By the year 2000, the company was doing really bad. Phil described trying to find money to loan the production of Jonah, and every single bank was just saying no to them.
Well, yeah, we had just purchased that land in downtown Lombard, and then we're paying rent on the place at the Yorktown Mall, and we had just changed software and hired a bunch of new people. Yeah, I mean, it was like this huge expansion right then, and you inevitably lose control of a lot of aspects of it. Not that Phil was a control freak or anything like that, but the fingers went out too far and too quickly. He was spread too thin trying to keep up with everything. It was just the exponential growth at that time and not a good foundation to build upon that. Had we done it a little bit slower or a lot slower, we'd be having a different interview right now.
Hello, Joe McFadden, who still works at Big Idea Productions in the year of our Lord 2024.
Right, yeah, heading up special projects and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, that's kind of the life that you led because after Big Idea, you haven't worked in a particular studio per se, like a normal animator or a lot of the animation brethren that went on before you. You're slimboJones now.
I didn't want to go out to California necessarily. I mean, It's a beautiful state and the weather's nice and stuff. But I don't know, there was something intimidating about it. And like I said, I never really felt like an actual animator. I felt kind of a jack of all trades. And I wasn't sure that that was the right thing for me to do. So I'm like, I kind of want to do my own thing here. Let's start my own company and do freelance work and eventually get to the point where we're doing some sort of episodic format stuff, just like VeggieTales. Things were starting to change then too. That kind of work was, I mean, it was hard to get into those spaces. Well, the Christian bookstore was easier to get into, but selling your videos at Walmart was a nightmare. You literally had to have like a team of professional people, like lobbyists for Walmart to get your stuff in there. So I understood about the art side and the production side of it, but the business side, no. I didn't realize, what it would ever take to start your own thing. It wasn't like I was trying to do some big giant thing like Chris Olsen. He started up that Threads. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, so you know about that. I have all the plush figures that he had released when they first started. I'll have to dig those out sometime and show them to you. But yeah, he created plush characters for each one of the main characters. And yeah, I got those somewhere. He was more of that mindset to gear up a whole company to do something like that. And he actually came to Big Idea one time and tried to recruit me to leave Big Idea and work for him on Threads. Sometimes I wish I would have, but yeah, at the time, I was making pretty good money and everything seemed stable. And no, as much as I like you, Chris, I got to stick with this. So I decided to kind of stick it out on my own and branch off. And there was a bunch of us that tried to get our own show going. We had come up with an idea with Robert Ellis. It was me and Robert and Tom, Danon, and Nathan. And we were working on a show about sheep. I can't think of what it was called now. But we were going to incorporate as a business. I think we are going to call it Little Guy Productions. We would meet every week or two, and Luis Contreras was drawing storyboards for us and stuff. Nobody was getting paid. There was no money involved. It was just animators who didn't want to leave town, just feeling desperate to get something going. So like, well, we got to do something. All of us had saved up money and stuff from working at Big Idea too, not tons. So we were able to kind of float for a little while without actual work, and we got unemployment compensation too for having been laid off. We didn't incorporate slimboJones until like 2007. That was many years, after I started working on my own. So I was trying to pick up freelance gigs for a long time. And so I made some money doing that, but we worked a lot. But yeah, I worked with Phil to do a lot of those NBC VeggieTales episodes. We would animate the front and back of it, the intro and outro, and they would show a regular episode in between on NBC. So we did all that stuff, me, and I hired Tom and Nathan and Robert to do the animation. So we started getting stuff like that. When I say we, it was me and my wife, Jennifer. So that was really good. And then we got a big job working for, it was another animation production company, but they couldn't do it. So they hired us to do the animation and production for them. And it was a WANA job. We did one for Pacific Church. We did all these animations with a snake and a spider and oh man, I can't remember the characters now, but I've never worked so hard in my life. Oh my goodness. Because I was essentially doing everything except the animation. I was building the characters and we were hiring some modelers too. I had this huge contract for like 4 episodes. Yeah, it was this undertaking that I probably shouldn't have done so early and doing freelance work. But there was a point at which I hadn't slept for 3 entire days because I was trying to keep up with all the problems happening and getting more work and keeping the animators flowing and trying to get things rendered, and literally didn't sleep for 3 days. I started having mental problems. I remember crying my eyes out at one point, and it was the stupidest thing, but the belt loop on Jennifer's pants was broken and it just overwhelmed me somehow. And when I saw it, I just started uncontrollably crying. That's what sleep deprivation does to you. That job never turned out as good as I thought it would. I love the work that we did, but I thought it could have been a lot better. But that was like the last big job that I had. And then from there on out, it was generally just small stuff or picking up some work at some studios, doing some freelance work for different studios. I've never achieved the level of success I did when I first started out in the freelance work for yourself world. I've done some really good stuff, that's for sure. And it's been a lot of fun, but I've learned a lot of new skills. I'm really good at modeling now, and I love doing rendering and the full production schedule there. I do miss just straight animating. The times that I do get to animate, it's so nice where I don't have to build the characters and things like that. It doesn't happen as much as I would like it to anymore.
One of the coolest aspects of you doing this freelance job is that you've been able to return a big idea on the occasion throughout the years. Doing animation on God Made You Special, doing all of the countertop sequences, animating the incredibly lively DVD menus for stuff like Gideon, Moan the Big Exit, and then, working on some later episodes like The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Penniless Princess, Little House That Stood. And yeah, I can't forget, at the NBC episodes, which I remember always trying to tune in 12 p.m. every Saturday.
All that stuff was a lot of fun. We got so much work from Big Idea those first couple of years. And it was really nice. And I thought, wow, this is the way to go. And yeah, it was just because of who we knew and everything. I was of that mindset. It was easy to pick up all that stuff. But eventually people started leaving Big Idea and things started changing. And that work wasn't coming as frequently as it had. Like when Chris Wall started heading up the production, he worked with us a lot initially to get things going, but eventually that got more and more separated. A lot of it just working over the internet, without being right there. I think that was a lot to do with it. And then they found a local studio in Nashville, Magnetic Dreams. So they took over doing a lot of the VeggieTales animation and stuff. And that's when it really occurred to me like, oh man, other people can do this work. I feel like I'm losing touch with it and I've kind of lost it forever now, that these other big studios are taking it over. So it was kind of a sad moment when that work started thinning out and then disappeared altogether. It was hard to let Bob and Larry go.
One of the last projects you ever worked on VeggieTales, you were doing animation for some of those sporting events. I remember that there was some of those that were posted on their YouTube channel.
Those were a lot of fun. There were promos for the local teams there in Nashville. I think they would run them during the games or something like that. The hype videos that they played during the game. They had like special days where they would use these VeggieTales things. And then some of the weird stuff that would happen at conferences where Larry was in the costumes with the itchy wool sweater and stuff like that. Those were just aired at the beginning of these conferences that they were putting together where like Phil or Mike was a guest speaker. So we get a bunch of those too. I think I posted one or two of those. We were usually being hired directly by Mike or Phil or who was ever involved with running those productions. Yeah, it was really cool to have it slowly, keep working on the Veggies for so long afterwards. I think that was at least until like 2008 or 2009.
I think it was a little bit later than that because I remember one of the things that you posted on Twitter was this animation of Larry doing the song for an episode that came out in 2014. It was called The Final Frontier, and there was a little music video that was on the DVD, and you did some of the Larry animation for it.
Oh, Final Frontier. That doesn't sound familiar.
I remember the melody of it, but yeah, there's like this part where Larry's like rapping, and you posted on Twitter that you were doing all of the animation for it.
Oh, I completely forgot about this. I think this was the very last thing I did. I remember the sweater.
There you go. That was the very last officially animated Joe McFadden anything, a big idea.
Yeah, we get to the point where it might be a year or something, but we get a call and, hey, we need this VeggieTales thing done for this specific promotional. I think we did some Chick-fil-A promotionals. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard, but with Phil Vischer trying to get his Phil and Mike show, trying to make that a show, I mean, I think if you get in contact with him, hopefully he might have some more work for you.
I love what he did with that. It looks so cool. The design of the characters is so nice. It's got a unique look that I really like. Really drawn to cartoony, cute stuff like that. Phil's always been real good at doing stuff like that. That's the first time in a long time he's made something that new because he was into he started out doing puppets, not really a puppet person, but those characters for the Phil and Mike show are so cool. Do you know if that's moved forward at all?
I have no idea personally, but it seems like it is because it's on his website and it just says coming soon. So I'm assuming that maybe something's gonna get off the ground with it.
They were trying to get Angel Studios to pick it up. I know the Angel Guild, because I looked into that when Phil talked about it. I was like, oh, I want to be part of the Angel Guild. Then I saw how much it costs, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to be.
No, that was my thought process too. I was like, I want to support Phil.
Right.
Let me see the price. Never mind. Sorry,
Right,
Phil.
yeah.
I love you, but no.
Rather just send them the money than be part of that and vote on it.
You have a PayPal, Phil? I'll send you a couple
Right.
cents.
Really hope that goes somewhere. Yeah, it looks so nice. It looks like it'd be a lot of fun. Everything Phil does is really cool, and yeah, I miss working with him. We tried to get together and do a couple of things. He would call me and float these ideas like, hey, can you do this? But for some reason, nothing ever worked out. He was always doing something outside of my comfort zone. I even went in one time to test doing some, I think it was using Adobe Animate, one of those Flash substitutes. And he had some college kids working for him to get this thing rolling. And I remember they wanted me to do a test of the animation and stuff, and came home and did some work on it and sent it, and then never heard anything back. Oh my God, got rejected by college kids, man. We connect every couple of years, like we're going to work together, and it just never works out. I don't know. Me and Phil were never like buddies or anything like that. We're just, yeah.
Hey, Phil, you need an extra co-host on the Holy Post?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be very good at that.
Well, I mean, you won't know until you try, I guess.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm like, I'll never be good at that. And then it turns out okay.
I'm gonna pass it on to Mr. Lunch and then we'll wrap this thing up.
So, looking at your credits, you also worked on the VeggieTales Christmas Spectacular, as well as those Veggiecational books. So, do you remember working on those?
The Christmas Spectacular, was that the one that was aired on TV?
Yep.
The whole thing with Archibald and the bell, that huge contraption that rings the little bell. Am I describing it correctly?
Yeah, it was, they were saying ring little bells or something.
Yeah, ring bells go ting-a-ling-a-ling. So me and Jennifer came up with that whole concept. I was like, it would be so funny to have this giant contraption that rings a tiny little bell. And I kept pushing it. I finally got, I think it was Mike and Phil. I finally got them to allow us to do that. So I actually kind of concepted and wrote that whole section. They were always going to sing that song, but the way that they did it with Archie going up and down on the rope and stuff, that was all mine and Jennifer's idea. Because I think I got her to champion it for me. She was like a producer at that point, but really wanted to do that so bad. And I was thrilled. That was going to be on TV too. Yeah, the videotape's not a big deal, but on TV, yeah. Is that available online? I haven't seen that in a long time.
It's available on the holiday double feature, which they released later.
Oh, okay. I'd like to see that again. I don't even remember how it probably looks ridiculous now. I have this specific memory of how awesome it was, and watching it now, I'd probably be horrified that I'm talking it up.
Well, I have to applaud you on that because that's special. I think that was a pretty funny special.
Can't remember who designed the actual machine with the pipes and stuff. Not really steampunk, but my original vision was them going up and down on these giant ropes to ring the little bell. I just thought that was so funny. It was always hard to get them to do certain shapes like that. They would just look straight up and down if they didn't bend off to the side and stuff. So I always had to come up with creative ways to make them look like they were doing something.
Now, the second question I have to ask is that I know that there were some wacky shenanigans at Big Idea because, like, Cindy Kenny, you probably worked with her. She talked about how some of the artists would slide down the escalators in the mall and stuff like that. So, were you a part of any of those shenanigans that were going on at Big Idea?
We used to have Nerf gun fights. I don't think they were actual Nerf guns back then, but they shot those darts. And for a while, that was a big thing to just like shoot those darts all over the place. So we would do things like that. One time, it was Jennifer's birthday, my wife, and somebody got this idea to bring in an Elvis impersonator. I don't know why it was Elvis either. She was not an Elvis fan, but they wanted to trick her into thinking that this guy was applying for a job. So he comes in with these sideburns and this hair, but he's like applying for a management position. And Jennifer's supposed to interview him. And she's like, why do I need to interview him? Well, that's just the way it goes. Partway through the interview, he jumps up and starts singing this Elvis song to her for her birthday. Like, I don't know whose idea it was. And I'm still looking for the videotape. We secretly videotaped the whole thing, the uncomfortable interview and stuff. Because all he could think about was, I got to play Elvis. I got to play Elvis. So Jen's asking him all these questions like he's going to work there. You could tell that he's just thinking Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. But it was very weird. Probably the craziest thing, we were at the mall and it was during the Jonah production, and Bill Helgen had come in, and it was the 4th of July, right? A bunch of us are working there. I think there was 5 special people that came in from It was Alias at the time, not Autodesk, but they came from the company that produced Maya, and they came to help us get through Jonah. There was so like these 5 high-level people, and we were all working that night on the 4th of July. So Bill brings in these fireworks that are illegal in Illinois, of course. So he's like, hey, you guys should enjoy your 4th of July. So he plunks them on the table and leaves. So we go out in the parking lot and start lighting off all these fireworks at 9 o'clock at night in the mall parking lot, and not even thinking about mall security. Suddenly here comes all these mall security cars. We're like, oh no, we can't get in trouble. So we all ran. I actually hid inside of an unlocked car out in the parking lot, and a bunch of other people like ran back inside the building. That's how they knew it was us. Yeah, so we got in so much trouble. Company got a talking to about launching fireworks in the parking lot. Felt like I was back in high school all of a sudden, running from the police. That was definitely one of the craziest things we did at the mall. We almost got ourselves kicked out. But then we all went and saw production fireworks somewhere that night still too. Wasn't really involved in any major shenanigans. And that was just a small group of people with the fireworks. Most of them were Canadian, so they didn't even care.
Funny you mentioned that because this guy right here is Canadian as well. So
Oh, yeah?
you want to apologize for that lunch?
Oh man, I have to apologize again. I am sorry, Joe McFadden.
Canada's cool. We went up there for an animation festival one time. That's the only time I've ever been out of the country.
The final thing that I'm going to bring up before we close this interview. What can you tell us about this fine woman right here?
Yeah, we kind of dated on and off for a little while at Big Idea, and then it became serious. And then after we got laid off, we both decided to stick around here, and we got married in 2005. It took me a long time to propose. I'm like one of those wait till the last minute type people, but proposed to her on the winter solstice because I thought it was cool to say that the days would get lighter from here on out.
This is the other picture that I have.
I still have that shirt. I have one of those lamps. I still have that alien thing that's on the wall.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. You better have that alien still lying around there somewhere.
That desk lamp there. Those are like old industrial lamps. The space we had in downtown Chicago, they were furnished with all those. So I took a bunch of them when I left. They sell for hundreds of dollars now. Like people buy them on eBay for a lot of money. It's crazy. I still have like 3 of them, I think.
That's cool. But yeah, with that being said, though, thank you so much for getting this interview into the books. Have a good rest of your evening, man.
You too. Thank you so much. It was a whole lot of fun, and I look forward to doing something again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know it.
All right. Good night.
Have a good one.
And that concludes our interview with Joe McFadden. I'd like to thank Joe for taking part in this terrific interview. Check out Joe's Twitter for more behind-the-scenes information, veggie memorabilia, and insights. Link will be in the comments. Special thanks to Reziel for all of his help as well. And we'll see you on the next What's the Big Idea podcast.
Pew, pew.